When whistleblowers speak out, the fallout can be huge. They often face retaliation from the organisations that they are trying to hold to account. Most whistleblowers don't become household names. They lose their careers, their families, and in some cases, even their lives. In the UK, disclosures are supposed to be protected by a law known as the Public Interest Disclosure Act. Case after case has shown over the years, the law that is meant to protect whistleblowers does no such thing, and has actively harmed whistleblowers in the process. Everyone agrees something needs to change, but not everyone agrees on how. One of the most controversial ideas on the table, modelled on schemes in the United States, is to pay whistleblowers to come forward. Supporters say it gives power to the vulnerable. Critics warn it could reward the loudest, not the most truthful, and become a magnet for bad actors. This documentary looks at what happens when reform becomes profitable, and into the controversial organisation driving this push. Because if paying whistleblowers is the answer, and we're creating a new industry with potentially millions of pounds at stake, what happens when whistleblowing becomes a business?
Our charity Protect was influential in drafting the UK's whistleblowing law. It's called the Public Interest Disclosure Act, and at the time it was groundbreaking.
So there's no definition of whistleblowing in the law. It's more about the act of whistleblowing. So the law kind of outlines, doesn't say this person is a whistleblower. It's more this act, this disclosure of information can be protected if it meets these certain requirements.
Whistleblowing protection gives that individual the opportunity to speak out, to highlight bad behaviour, wrongdoing, with the confidence that they won't have their career destroyed as a result of speaking out.
But over the years, it's become clear it hasn't protected whistleblowers. Eileen Chubb, one of the first people to file a case under PIDA, is a vocal critic of the legislation.
PIDA has not worked because, to condense it down, it's a compliance-based law. It presumes that if you have a compliance package and a whistleblowing policy, that you must abide by that. But that is just a piece of paper at the end of the day, and pieces of paper don't keep people safe. They do not. They're just pieces of paper. They're there for appearance's sake. And PIDA relies too heavily on that approach, on that compliance approach.
Her organisation, Compassion and Care, took evidence from thousands of whistleblowers, who largely concluded the same. The legislation is simply not fit for purpose and should be scrapped, as it is impossible to fix laws so badly broken. Under the current legislation, if you're sacked after speaking out, you can take your case to an employment tribunal, where an independent judge will decide whether you were dismissed because you blew the whistle. But even if you are vindicated by the evidence, you can still lose the case, and the law does not protect whistleblowers from future retaliation.
The law at the moment is incredibly complicated. It's very difficult for an individual to navigate the employment tribunal system on their own.
Tribunals are often seen by whistleblowers as ineffective, because even if they are successful, the tribunal has no powers to compel their employers to act on their whistleblowing, nor can it compel future employers to not discriminate against whistleblowers. Martin Woods, an anti-money laundering specialist who exposed a bank laundering money for drug cartels, explains what happened after he spoke out.
After I'd blown the whistle, we settled with an employment before tribunal. They paid me some money. I began to work myself. And then afterwards, when I started to apply for jobs, I realised something was wrong with my registration with the Financial Conduct Authority. And I discovered they'd fabricated allegations against me, made up stories, and the email said bluntly to stop me ever working in the city again.
The FCA has denied blacklisting Mr. Woods. Wendy Addison, who blew the whistle in her native South Africa, also faced similar treatment.
I ended up being blacklisted as a whistleblower and fired from an organisation. My son and myself ended up begging on the streets and squatting in a house to survive.
I went into my first care home job and I saw terrible abuse of vulnerable people. To cut it down, there were 7 of us, but we didn't know about each other at the time, and we were all reporting it. As a result of our experiences, we realised that whistleblowers were not protected. We were the first case to lodge a PEDA case under whistleblowing law, and we were the first people to be failed by UK whistleblowing law, even though all our concerns were upheld.
Everyone agrees the law needs to change, but not everyone agrees on how. One highly controversial idea, imported from the US, is to pay whistleblowers to make disclosures.
My understanding is that there has been, in the United States, some sense that the incentives have made it easier for people to speak out, and has increased the tendency for people to raise concerns because they see the possibility that they will be rewarded for doing the right thing.
Because American businesses are concerned about whistleblowers. The reward makes them think it only takes one amongst us to tell the authorities. He or she is, 1, rewarded, and 2, they're not going to go to prison, but we might. What it makes them, that the business people do, it makes them stop, think, and not break the law. No reward, no whistleblowing, but most importantly, no wrongdoing.
Now that's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is that creating financial incentives can result in potentially bad behaviours, people being incentivised to raise concerns that might not be real. And you create a sort of whole industry around whistleblowing.
An anxiety I have about commercialisation is the representation, the legal representation for whistleblowers will be targeted towards where the money is. So the lawyers will go for the big case because they're going to get 20% of the actual reward fee, and there'll be inadequate representation for the healthcare whistleblower.
Today, Whistleblowers UK, an organisation run by Georgina Halford Hall and former Tory MP Joe Gideon, are a significant influence attempting to reshape whistleblowing law.
I was able to volunteer for Whistleblowers UK and get involved, and the thing is, it's not what it cracked up to be. It's not what I thought it was going to be, but it felt very much like there was a different agenda, that it was more about money, power, and influence rather than, just protecting the average member of the public.
WBUK was founded in the late 2000s by whistleblowing campaigners who knew the system was failing whistleblowers and it needed to change. But even in those early days, campaigners were concerned about the financial incentivisation of whistleblowers. Most whistleblowing cases do not involve large sums of money. Campaigners are concerned that by focusing on the large financial services cases, ordinary whistleblowers will continue to be left behind without the support they need.
I remember a time being sat in the original meeting with Whistleblowers UK, and I was in that room with healthcare whistleblowers, and I felt slightly uncomfortable and embarrassed by the financial services whistleblowers and the millions we're talking about, and these healthcare professionals, some of whom are on minimum wage, seeing immediate harm taking place and taking action.
Gavin McFadden, who was a close friend of mine and a fantastic journalist, he wanted to set up an organisation to support whistleblowers, and that was around 2013. And a lot of whistleblowers came together, including a man called Ian Foxley.
It soon became clear to campaigners that such an agenda was incompatible with their core beliefs and desire to put whistleblowers first.
It was very toxic because he was, without asking any of the other people, he was submitting things to Parliament saying he supported the US bounty hunting agenda. He submitted evidence and it was mentioned in Hansard, and nobody else knew about that. And we were all opposed to the US system for obvious reasons. So that was our first encounter, and we all decided, all of the whistleblowers, that from various sectors, we all left because of Ian Foxley. And we founded our own organisation called The Whistler.
In a statement sent to this programme, Ian Foxley disputes the claim that his evidence to Parliament created a toxic working environment, but did acknowledge that there was a difference of opinion among WBUK executives. He maintains his evidence was coordinated with other WBUK founding members. Foxley gave up the role of chairman of WBUK in 2015 and did not wish to comment on the organisation, its policies or the current directors. After Foxley, Georgina Halford Hall took over, and the organisation, which became secretariat to the political group shaping legislation. Laws in the UK are often shaped by what are known as all-party parliamentary groups, or APPGs for short. They are made up of MPs and peers from different political parties, and they help shape policy on niche subject areas. Critics say they can also be a handy vehicle for lobbyists and even hostile states to influence policy via the back door. In recent years, APPGs have been hit by a string of scandals, sparking calls for tougher regulation. An investigation by the BBC in late 2021 even described APPGs as the source of the next Westminster lobbying scandal.
I think what often happens is that there are only moves to strengthen the rules when there's a scandal, when something is exposed, when perhaps some commercial organisation is seen to be behind the work of a particular all-party group. For me, it would be much better if the parties in Parliament recognised the vital importance of absolute financial transparency so that we avoid scandals happening in the first place.
I just wanted to be part of something. So it was very much like, what can I do to help this organisation? Let's not even speak about my case. Let's have, nothing to do with that. Let's look at how we can promote the Office of the Whistleblower or, raise funds for the organisation.
The Office of the Whistleblower Bill is WBUK's answer to the whistleblowing question, as she told the Whistleblowing Network News YouTube channel.
And we are raising awareness, as you are in the States, to ensure that all of those people have somewhere to go to, and that information is brought together so it can be investigated by those who have the statutory powers to be able to do so. And for us, it's going to be the Office of the Whistleblower and the Whistleblowing Bill.
The bill would copy American-style incentives for whistleblowers, establishing a non-governmental body which would themselves investigate whistleblowing claims. The Office of the Whistleblower would adjudicate disputes and have the power to fine companies 10% of their global revenue, up to £18 million. This money would be used to fund the organisation. Furthermore, according to WBUK's website, they state that whistleblowers themselves would be compensated for their disclosures, with the amount to be determined by the Office of the Whistleblower. This is a stark contrast to the current system, which involves an independent judge-led tribunal. In short, it would make the Office of the Whistleblower the sole arbiter of who is a whistleblower, the fines companies should pay, and what money individual whistleblowers should be awarded. APPGs are not funded by the government and receive funding externally, which is to be declared. A loophole in legislation means the secretariats of groups do not have to declare their funding. This became a cause of concern for campaigners, who believe US law firms who specialise in whistleblowing bounty cases might be funding the change in UK legislation.
Primarily, those whistleblowers had a concern about the introduction of financial incentives to give to whistleblowers, which is a system that's been introduced in the United States. When one of them contacted me to say, can you ask questions about how the group is funded and how the secretariat, the support for the group is funded, that seemed to be entirely appropriate. So I wrote to the person who was providing the support. This was an individual who was outside Parliament, and I put the questions that the campaigner had raised with me to her, and I didn't get an answer. In the face of a refusal to answer these important questions, I felt I had no alternative but to resign from my position as joint chair.
There is an American law firm, and there was an agreement in place that was made this year that they would pay fees of £15,000, but in return for that, my understanding was that this firm would come and speak at Whistleblowers Awareness Week.
If you've got an outside organisation that has a particular interest that it wants to peddle in Parliament, then it's important that the public knows about it, understands what their interests might be in providing that secretarial support, because it comes at a cost. So I think financial transparency is critically important. We need to know who is funding every all-party group in Parliament. And I was really concerned that when I found a lack of transparency in the whistleblowing committee, and I raised it in Parliament, it seemed like the parliamentary authorities could do nothing to pursue my concerns.
When you join Whistleblowers UK, you fill in a form to become an associate member, and the expectation there is that you pay £10 a month to be part of Whistleblowers UK. In addition to that, some of the junior barristers who work for WBUK would charge £100 per hour to help with their cases.
A dossier compiled by Compassion and Care alleges whistleblowers who turned to WBUK for help were turned away for not having funds to pay for help such organisations usually provide for free, or that they were ignored entirely.
We started to get 1 or 2 calls from people who said that they'd called Whistleblowers UK or contacted them and they hadn't been contacted back. Not called, because they didn't have a phone number actually. It was an online form or an online contact thing. And they'd never been contacted back. Today we have 62 people that contacted us and said they contacted Whistleblowers UK and nobody went back to them. Or they'd contacted Whistleblowers UK and they were contacted back and they were asked to sign a contract for money. That we saw a pattern form from this. If they were low paid, very low paid people, they weren't contacted back at all. And if they were higher paid people, they were contacted back and asked for money. And that's about as damning as you can get. We were horrified to find that Whistleblowers UK were not answering people or asking for money.
Georgina can get quite annoyed that people sort of make that promise and then maybe don't come through with the payments at the end of the day. But Whistleblowers UK isn't regulated as a legal services provider. I was a bit concerned about the fact that they were offering these legal services.
WBUK were criticised for this by an employment judge, who also questioned their ability to provide regulated legal services.
The CEO was interested in cases that would be high profile or end up giving Whistleblowers UK lots of money.
You just can't do this, what we do, and see money. It's just disgusting beyond words what they've done. And if it was one person, it would be unforgivable. But they have done it to dozens of people. And those lives are still, they're damaged. And that harm has been done. And that abuse has happened. And yet Whistleblowers UK just treat it like we're the problem because we're actually asking, how can you do this? If you think there's money to be made in whistleblowing as a business or as an industry, the whistleblowing industry, then all I can say is that you are seriously deficient as a human being. Seriously deficient.
Critics of such a change in the law are concerned that US-style bounties could become a magnet for bad actors as the focus shifts to the cases with the largest financial potential.
The legal representation for whistleblowers will be targeted towards where the money is. So the lawyers will go for the big case because they're going to get 20% of the actual reward fee, and there'll be inadequate representation for the healthcare whistleblower.
If big payouts are brought in, campaigners warn it could create a whole new industry, one that rewards the loudest voices, not the most truthful.
There are bad faith actors out there, particularly in the UK, who have called themselves a whistleblower in order to create a career path for themselves in the whistleblowing world.
What happens when somebody with a controversial history, often producing lengthy, glossy whistleblowing reports to threaten adversaries with, becomes a whistleblowing ambassador?
Are you convinced? More, please. Hello. We're changing the world. We're going to change the world.
During the summer of 2025, WBUK held its annual Whistleblower Awareness Week. During Whistleblower Awareness Week, the organisation held events with their latest ambassador, Kristen Ager-Hansen, whom they had been lobbying for over several months. He was invited by WBUK to participate in events in Parliament, despite being considered a fugitive in the UK after fleeing to avoid a 10-month prison sentence. Shortly before being made an ambassador for WBUK, Ager-Hansen had been reported to the police in Sweden by Norén Bank, alleging he threatened to blow the whistle unless a settlement was reached. According to reports, he has threatened adversaries with legal and regulatory issues if they do not acquiesce to his demands. Journalists who have covered him over the years describe a pattern of conflict, litigation and flipping sides.
Don't give a shit.
Kristen Ager-Hansen is a Norwegian businessman, once one of the richest, or if not the richest one in Norway, but failed and tried different companies, all failed. I mean, in that regard, kind of like a failed businessman.
When you meet him, then it's a charming, interesting person. He's really like the host, for the evening, And then after a while, it depends what you're doing and which side you are on the story. Then you might have him as an enemy.
He is controversial in many different ways. And the people that I met who have engaged with him in business environments are a bit reluctant when they learn who he is. Reluctant in the sense that they don't want to have anything to do with him.
One of his former employees, Thomas Watson, later described him as a notorious Norwegian with a string of spectacular business failures and a Trumpian fondness for fibbing. Following a series of business disputes, Ager-Hansen began promoting what he described as a new speciality: conflict management. In a 2017 interview with the Daily Telegraph, Ager-Hansen claimed that wealthy and powerful individuals sought out his services.
So I would say he is a businessman that might be better in the courts than he is in actually running businesses. I think the courts provides the structure that he lacks in business.
In several of these disputes, he has acknowledged creating covert recordings, which he has said were used as part of his conflict resolution work. Several newspapers who have covered him over the years say they have documented cases in which adversaries felt pressured with legal or regulatory action if they did not settle with Ager-Hansen. In 2022, Ager-Hansen became embroiled in a dispute with crypto lawyer Kyle Roach. He produced a 500-page glossy whistleblowing report against Roach, who had been secretly recorded at Ager-Hansen's London office. Roach claims to have been drugged during the incident. Clips from those recordings were later published on a website known as CryptoLeaks. After initially denying involvement, Ager-Hansen later told Norwegian newspaper DN that he had orchestrated the operation himself.
So I think he enjoys actually the path, finding a path and reach success. So his mindset is kind of like a startup founder where morals or ethics doesn't matter.
In October 2025, Swedish enforcement authorities carried out a court-authorised raid on Ager-Hansen while he was staying at a hotel in central Stockholm over unpaid legal costs relating to various lawsuits he had lost.
They said that we have a court order here and we want to see if you have anything of value here we can take from you, and you had to open the safe here, the hotel safe, and there were all these watches.
The Swedish action followed legal proceedings in Norway brought by his former employer, during which Ager-Hansen again claimed to be a whistleblower. In its ruling, the Norwegian court stated, "The report has subsequently been assessed by 2 independent law firms. Both firms have concluded that all allegations in the report are unfounded." Ager-Hansen's report lacks foundation and was prepared to further his own interests. Ager-Hansen recently announced the creation of the European Whistleblowing Centre, seemingly to try and copy the US model on the continent. Ager-Hansen was approached repeatedly for comment in response to the claims made against him, but we received no response. The case of Kristen Ager-Hansen is not, by itself, an argument against reform. Cases like these expose a fault line, one that appears when whistleblowing is linked to money, status and political influence.
They met at like a Michelin-starred restaurant, and she was very sort of proud to talk about how she'd kept him on board, and that if this comes off with his particular case, they would be in the money, you know, £250,000 or whatever.
Whistleblowers just don't want to be in that situation. They don't want to have to go to court. They want to know that the wrongdoing was stopped. And if you know, that's the key thing here, is that whistleblowers, we're dealing with very different whistleblowers to what Whistleblowers UK consider whistleblowing. I mean, Aga Hansen is not a whistleblower. I can understand that any organisation could make a mistake here and there, but they have, without fail, championed cases that are just not whistleblowing at all by any stretch of the imagination.
Parliamentary rules forbid using access to Parliament for private or commercial gain. Some parliamentary observers have expressed concern that this could give the appearance of monetising access, something Parliament explicitly prohibits.
The fact that I pulled away from the group was frustrating because it made it more difficult to make my case to government, but I am absolutely sure that I did the right thing.
This is giving a completely wrong impression to the whistleblowers, because this isn't a supportive, kind place.
Messages sent by Halford Hall also show a damning lack of compassion towards whistleblowers who have reached out to the organisation for help. In one exchange seen by this programme, she even says one can F off because he hasn't paid his subscription fees.
So yes, we've heard that many times, that the way that she speaks to people. I mean, she told one of the whistleblowers who contacted us, who was raising issues of child abuse, that my time is money and I haven't got time to talk to you. Yeah, even though this person is trying to raise stuff about child abuse. Valid concerns, by the way. You know, not somebody that's mad and making up things.
It was almost like she didn't like whistleblowers. She was sick of whistleblowers, was something that she'd said a couple of times. And I thought, why are you saying this to me? Because I am a whistleblower.
Office for the Whistleblower has been up on their website since their first website, saying that that's their objective. And then they said they set up an APPG to take evidence from whistleblowers to see what they think they want. And then said, oh, well, the Office for the Whistleblower is what they want. Well, actually, it isn't.
The fact that whistleblowing was always seen through a moral lens, it's now seen through a financial lens. That is the intention. First of all, most whistleblowers will say, we didn't do it because we wanted to be rewarded. There was no motivation around monetary rewards for us to do the right thing.
If the Office of the Whistleblower is established, a small, unaccountable body could become the sole arbiter of who is and is not a whistleblower. They would have the power to fine companies up to £18 million, and awards to individual whistleblowers would be determined by the same group. That risk becomes clearer when you look at who supporters of this bill are already championing, including those whom a court has already ruled their claims to be unfounded, yet are still championed as whistleblowing ambassadors.
It often increases retaliation on whistleblowers, because now they're seen to be looking for money.
The regulator model doesn't work, firstly. But secondly, the funding. So you're going to have a two-tier system, because the Office for the Whistleblower will be paid by fines on large institutions. So you're not going to get a big fine out of a care home company. And it's negligible. So you're going to have like two cases come in, one's from a bank, one's a care worker. You're going to prioritise the one that's going to pay your wages, because that's the way human nature works. So the Office of the Whistleblower is completely compromised in how it's structured and everything that it does. It's just another layer or obstacle that a whistleblower has to jump.
I have a problem with it when you're going to encourage people to blow the whistle because you can see a financial upside without giving adequate consideration to their downside.
We need to look at the facts, the data, to understand whether on balance it's a good thing or a bad thing. I am agnostic on this. What I want to see is strengthened protection for whistleblowers.
It has pacified me somewhat that there are MPs that are being presented with the Office of the Whistleblower framework by others that have been captured by the charismatic bad actors that are thinking differently and bringing their narrative to counter the narrative of let's carry on with the commercialization
of whistleblowing as an industry.
Everyone agrees that the UK's whistleblowing legislation needs to change, but the changes being pushed in Parliament carry risks that cannot be ignored. Legitimate whistleblowers already face an uphill battle to be heard and not be punished for their courage.
It's in the interests of all of us that people who work in those situations feel able to raise concerns about bad behaviour, and that is what whistleblowing is all about.
It's not the organisation I originally thought it was, and I'm glad I found out sooner rather than later, but I just don't want to see other vulnerable people going to organisations like Whistleblowers UK where they're not necessarily going to get the kind of help and support they need.
If we create a new organisation whose funding relies on always siding with whistleblowers, it could become a magnet for bad actors hoping to exploit the system. A system so malleable to abuse will be impossible to trust, and yet again, genuine whistleblowers will be the ones to suffer the consequences. Whistleblowing is already a difficult choice any one of us may have to make. Under the wrong system, doing the right thing becomes impossible.
People's lives are absolutely destroyed because they just try to do the right thing. And you just can't comprehend the kind of hardship people have to. They have to choose between putting food on the table for their own children or doing the right thing. And that should never happen in any civilised country. It just shouldn't happen. And that's why it's so important that Whistleblowers UK are removed from this. They should not have contact with people that are vulnerable. And they certainly should not have any contact with anyone when there's lives on the line like there is. And what they've done is horrendous. Our phone doesn't stop ringing from people that they failed already, who are absolutely in tears and saying, well, you know, why are they on the TV? Why are they on Newsnight when they've done what they've done to me? Why won't anyone listen to me? And I go, I don't know why anyone won't listen. But we will try to get them exposed. We will just keep telling the truth and keep publishing the data until somebody somewhere listens. Because if you can't listen on this, you're buggered on any other kind of whistleblowing. You really are.
Thank you.